Marhaban. My name is Ian Campbell, and this series of 4 videos is the first series in a whole set of videos explaining the basics of how to speak, read, and write Al-Fusha, or Modern Standard Arabic. These 4 videos will explore the root pattern system that is the base of how all words are formed in the language. This system works very, very differently from English, so it's essential to understand it before we move on to phrases and sentences, or even words. In this first video in the series, we'll be looking at judur, or roots, and how they determine the general meaning of words. So let's begin by giving the word for root. Al-jidr, over here in Arabic text with the nice little zigzag back and forth for the jim. Al-jidr is the word for root, that is like the root of a tree or the root of a problem or what have you. Nearly every word native to Arabic, excluding pronouns and a few other things, prepositions, has a root, which is usually 3 letters, that determines its general field of meaning. So here's the word jidr, and you can see the jim, val, ra, that's its root. And here's its plural, judur is its plural. Here we've added a long vowel wow, but you can still see the 3 root letters. Determining the root of a word is usually pretty easy. I'll go into this in a little more detail later. I'll give you an example. So words with the same root share a similar meaning. For example, all of the words with ayn, lem, mim, and notice I'm going right to left here when I give Arabic letters, like we should go in Arabic, have something to do with knowledge. So here's al-ilm, which means knowledge, and this could be secular knowledge, like science, or it could be religious scholarship as well. It's going to depend on the siyaq, the context. So this word is easy to tell. Ayn, lam, mim, there's only 3 letters, just like jim, val, ra up here. So it's easy to tell what the root is. Here we've added a bunch of other things to it. So here's alif, lam at the beginning, and here's a meme. Remember, we often write alif, lam, meme like it's alif, meme, lam, so watch out for that. Here's our ayn and our lam, and then here's a long vowel wow, and here's our meme, and then the at ending. At is usually a plural ending here. So we've added these things, the meme and the wow, in order to turn ilm, knowledge, into ma'lum, that which has been made known. And then we make it plural and add the definite article to give us things that have been made known, therefore data or information. So you can see they both have something to do with knowledge. The order of the letters is actually important. So for example, we have ayn, lam, mim means knowledge, but ayn, mim, lem means to work or labor. So if you swap the last 2 letters, it's going to make it mean something completely different. So you got to watch out for that. So another example is words that have ayn, wow, dal in them have something to do with returning or coming back, but words with ayn, dal, wow mean aggression or invasion. So be careful about that. It's very characteristic of students at the intermediate level to accidentally transpose the second 2 root letters and come up with these really bizarre readings of things. I used to drive my own professor crazy with these. So let's take an extended example here. The root jim, mim, ayn means to gather something. Again, I'm going to go right to left in Arabic when I give you letters like this. So any word that has these 3 letters in this order is almost certainly going to have something to do with gathering. So here's a whole bunch of examples I typed up. So al-jam' is plural, the plural of something. It has a number of other meanings as well, but that's the context you'll see it in the most. And this is hard to do, to pronounce ayn at the end of a word without a vowel sound after it. Now normally there will be a vowel sound after it because there'll be another word after it and you can run them together. But just pronouncing it by itself is a bit of a challenge. Al-jam', al-jam'. Be sure not to say al-jam' and leave it off, but al-jam'. It's a little tough to learn to say, especially at first. So that's the plural of something, the things that have been gathered. So I can say judur, jam', jidr. So judur is the plural of jidr, for example. Al-jum'ah is a word I've already taught you before when we were doing days of the week. So al-jum'ah is Friday, the day that we gather together in the mosque in order to go pray. And here's the mosque right here, al-jami'. So al-jami' is literally the gatherer, So the mosque gathers people together in order to engage in religious devotion. So go to the Jami' on Jum'ah. And of course you can go to it any other day as well if you want to, but Jum'ah is when the most people are going to be there. So here's the very similar word, al-jami'ah. We've taken jami' for mosque or gatherer is literally what it means, and added ta marbuta to give it a slightly different meaning. This is very common in Arabic. So a jami'ah is a university. And the reason it's called this is not only because it gathers people together for knowledge, but really because universities grew out of mosques. So Al-Azhar in Cairo, or the Qarawiyyin in Fez in Morocco, for example, these were these great big mosques that where secular, first religious and then secular scholars also started to gather and do teaching around the pillars of the mosque and so forth. So when European, not colonizers, but really explorers in like the 1000s of our calendar came to the much more sophisticated and richer Arab world, they saw that big mosques had these groups of scholars that would hang out there and exchange information. And they thought this is a great idea, and they took it back to Europe with them. And you'll see that if you look at the history of European universities, nearly all of them, like Paris, for example, grew out of big cathedrals. They did pretty much the same thing, only they called it universitas, which means corporation in Latin, instead of taking it from the word for cathedral, for example. So a jami' is a mosque, a jami'ah is a university, because they both gather people together. Jami' is more like an adjective, all of something. So jami' al-ma'lumat, all of the information, for example. So all, of course, they've been gathered together. You can probably see where this came from. Al-Jama'ah is a group, but like a group with like a formal name and a formal letterhead and a formal organizational structure, that kind of thing. For example, I belong to a group, a Jama'ah, of science fiction scholars. So any kind of group, but not just a casual group, but something with like a formal structure to it. Al-Majma' is literally the place of gathering. Notice we've added a meme down here. This is really common. It's often a grammatical prefix. But here's our three root letters, jim, mim, ayn. So the majma' is like the place of gathering, but what it means practically is more like an assembly or a convention where people get together. Usually members of a jama'ah can get together at a majma', for example. And in Arabic, it's considered really stylish and poetic to use multiple words from the same root in a way that it sounds weird in English. So you kind of have to get used to that. So a majma' is like an assembly like you might have in high school, or a convention of people. There's more, and this is only like half the total words for this particular root. So at-tajammu' is gathering, but in the sense of like people spontaneously gathering, like, oh, the weather was lovely, so people gathered in the park and had picnics and flew kites and whatever it is one does in a park, for example. But an ijtima' is a meeting, something that had a schedule and a time and a place and so forth. So a gathering much more on purpose than this, which is kind of like a spontaneous gathering. And it's very common to use ta as an additional letter as well. So here's ta at the beginning before the three root letters, and here's ta in between the first and second root letters, which is also very common. So you might be confused at first. You're like, oh, hey, this word has 4 letters, jim, ta, mim, ayn, but it really only has 3 root letters, and this is part of the word's wazn, or pattern, which is something I'll talk about in the next video. Majmu' is like that which has been gathered, so it's the total amount of something, or the whole, W-H-O-L-E, of something. So like the total cost, for example, or the total attendance at the majma', at the assembly, or at the ijtima', at the meeting, for that matter. And then if we add ta marbuta to it and make it a noun by adding alif lam at the beginning, then it becomes a collection, like a record collection, or a rock collection, or book collection. Serial killer trophy collection. Let's not go there. So this is something that you have a collection of. So this is the total, this is the collection. They're very similar because they've been gathered. And then last, al-mujtama, here's our infixed ta again between the first and second root letters and the prefix meme. This is that which has been gathered and therefore society. So you could see that all of these words, they're very different in English, but they all have the same root in Arabic because they have something to do with gathering. Let me move on and give you a different example. So the letters ha, fa, val in that order give us to preserve something, and we get a lot of words from this one as well. So al-hifdh, which is a little bit of a mouthful for an English speaker to say, especially at first, a hifdh is memorization of something. So whether it be grammatical details or people's names at a convention, that sort of thing. It can also mean preservation in a general sense, but the context in which you're most likely to encounter it is that of memorization. Most of the Arabic school systems still work much more on rote memorization than ours do. So one time a bunch of us study abroad students long ago baffled our Arabic teacher because we weren't about to memorize a 50-line poem. Not only did we not want to, but none of us could, and he found this baffling. So a hafidha is something that you hold onto or preserve, and therefore a grudge. It's got some other meanings as well, but that's where you're likeliest to see it. A mahfadha, here's our prefix meme again, we'll see this a lot. So is like the place of preservation, and therefore we use it to mean your wallet, because it's where you preserve your ID cards and your money and so forth. It can also often mean like bag or a purse or folder or something like that, but wallet is the usual word, English word that it subs in for. So the mahfadha. So make sure you can get the ha in the middle of the word. And here I'm a bad video maker because I forgot to mute my email chime. Oh well. So al-mahfadha is your wallet. So what's in your wallet? Al-hifadh is maintenance, like doing maintenance on your car, making sure the oil is the right level, and so forth. It can also mean preservation as well, and it can also mean defending something, like you're preserving it from attack, but the usual context you'll see it is that of maintaining or maintenance of something. Muhafadha has two different meanings, but they're both related to preservation. One of them is political. So muhafadha is like political conservatism, like you want to preserve the old ways, patriarchal as they may be. It can also mean a province, like a province of a country. In the USA, we'll use the word wilaya for state, which really means like governorship. But in most of the rest of the world, you'll call the subdivisions of a country a muhafadha, like these things are preserved together under one name is kind of the idea behind it. A tahaffuz is, what would you call it in English? A precaution. Like you want to maintain things the way they are, so you go and take a tahaffuz to make sure nothing gets messed up. Now look here, we've got tahaffuz, we've got ta, and then the middle root letter gets shadda and dhamma. And then up here, we've got at-tajammu for spontaneous gathering. And while these root words have completely different roots, jim, mim, ayn up here, and ha, fa, dhal here, they have the same pattern. You've done the same thing to them. And what that means is they're going to be similar in terms of grammar, in terms of part of speech. And I'll go into this in much more detail in the next video. There's more. And again, this is only about half the words that come from this root. So al-ihtifadh is keeping, to keep something. Like where do you keep your wallet? Oh, in the pocket of my pants, that sort of thing. So that's, again, here's your infixed ta between the first two root letters, adding a long vowel alif as well, adding a vowel at the beginning of a word. This is a very common form. Look up here, al-ijtima', al-ihtifadh, different roots, same pattern. So they're going to have kind of a similar take on what they do to its root. And again, I'll go into this in the next video and also the fourth one. A hafiz is a preserver, just like up here. Al-jami' is a gatherer. So a hafiz, what would we call it? A custodian. So the custodian on our floor is a woman, so she would have ta marbuta added to it, a hafidha. It could mean guardian. It can also mean a person who has gone through an Arabic traditional primary school and has learned to memorize the whole Quran or large chunks of it. That person gets this special title, a hafiz, because they have done this. They've preserved in their memory the entire Quran. It's also a good Scrabble word in English, by the way. It works. So al-hafidha, again, here we've taken the same word and just added ta marbulta. This is like the receipt or the slip or the token that you get for something. It preserves the fact that you bought it or that that coat is yours when you took it to the coat check, that sort of thing. Mahfuz, same pattern as majmu' up here. Mahfuz means preserved. It's also a very common last name. So the Nobel Prize winning author Naguib Mahfouz, for example, this is how you spell his name in Arabic. And then someone who is muhafiz is politically or socially conservative, just like al-muhafadha is the noun for it. Muhafiz is the adjective for it. So my 95-year-old father, for example, quite politically conservative, believe it or not. So muhafiz would be politically conservative, and they all have something to do with preserving things. So you'll find that this is true for so many roots, and I'm going to give you, over the course of this entire series of video, tons and tons of roots and the words from them so you can understand how the language works. All right, so a few last things. First of all, for 85 to 90% of words, it's trivially easy to find the root, especially once you learn that meme is often a grammatical prefix, and a lot of time we'll get ta and sometimes seen also there. This is not a big deal. If the root is 3 consonants like ha, fa, tha, or jim, mim, ain, it's really, really easy to find the root of the word, and you won't have any problem with it. However, there's also a lot of words that it's hard to find the root for, and I'm going to get into that in the 3rd video in this series. So just kind of hold that in the back of your mind for now. Some words have 4 letters in their root rather than 3. Typically, this is because they're borrowed from other languages, notably Persian and Greek, and sometimes Sanskrit as well, and in the modern day, English and French and Italian and sometimes Spanish. So, for example, tarjama is the root for translation, and it's ta, ra, jim, mim. It's got 4 letters. There's not that many of these, and the ones that you need to know you'll get fairly quickly. They often also represent what we call onomatopoeia, which is making the sound that something makes. So qahqaha, for example, is to burst out laughing, or a zilzal is an earthquake. A lot of times it's the same 2-letter syllable repeated twice. This is mostly here for completeness purposes. Don't worry about it for right now. Treat the overwhelming majority of words as having 3 letters, and you won't go wrong. A very small number of words have only 2 root letters, and the only one you need to know is the word for name or noun, which is ism, and its root is just seen, meme. It's only got 2 letters because it's a very old word. And again, both of these here are just here for completeness purposes. You, as a first semester student, don't have to worry about that at all. But there is one thing you have to know, which is that alif is a letter of the alphabet, but it can't be a root letter. Alif is never a root letter. However, the hamza, the uh-oh sound, the glottal stop, is not technically a letter of the alphabet, but it can be a root letter. So, for example, su'al is question, and its root is seen, hamza, lem. Quran, the holy book, it comes from the word for to recite or to read, and that root is qaf, ra, hamza. So you're going to have to get used to thinking of hamza as a root letter, but alif cannot be. And this one's actually kind of important when you're searching for root letters. But for now, just understand that words have roots. They're nearly always 3 letters, and those 3 root letters determine the general field of meaning for a word. And that's a way in which English doesn't do things at all. So I'm going to come back in the next one and explain the basics of patterns, and then we're going to put them together, and then I'm going to show you a bunch of the irregular roots and how they tend to work. And then we're going to move on to words and phrases and sentences, but for now I'm going to say ma salama, goodbye.